thing that I'll go and do is show an engraving using some text. I'll grab the text tool off to the side here and click anywhere within the work area. And then down here is where I'm going to actually change that text. For this, I can type in anything. I think I'll put in GI30. And I can also pull down this menu system here, and then I have access to all of the fonts that I would normally find on my computer. And I'll change that. And up here, I can change the overall height to, let's say, 5 millimeters. I'm going to close this little box so that when I change the height, the width of that changes with the same ratio. And once again, because I changed the text, I changed the font, and I changed the size, I'm going to hit apply, and it's going to send all of those changes out to the workspace. I'll zoom in a little bit and we can see what that looks like. With my cursor on the mouse, I can grab this and I can move it all around the screen. But once again, what we normally do as standard practice with a fiber laser is we always engrave directly underneath the lens, centered as best as possible. There will be some projects where it's going to make sense to have it offset, and it's okay. But just as a general rule, we try and set the origin of our work exactly within the center of our work area. Next, let's check out the layer and the parameter settings. These settings are what's going to change the color and the texture of what our engraving looks like. When I first start the program out, when I start drawing things, boxes, it's going to default to layer 0, which is a black layer. And it's also going to default having this checked, use default parameters. I always just uncheck this. Before I get into some of the parameters down here, I want to compare it to something like a diode machine or a CO2 laser machine. If you're familiar with those, there's only ever two settings that you're really concerned about, and that is the speed of the machine and the power of the laser beam. When we talk about a fiber laser, there's going to be three things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to have the speed, we're going to have the power, but now there's this third element, and that is going to be the frequency. Generally, the lower the frequency, the more energy we're going to be driving into our work material. So it's going to dig deeper into that material. It's going to add typically more texture, if you will. And if I run a higher frequency, this is generally going to create a lighter color engraving. So just by changing that frequency without changing the power or the speed, I can get a dark engraving, or I could get something that would look like a frosted white engraving on this steel plate. There's also going to be a fourth setting that I'm going to be utilizing, and that's because this machine has a MOPA power supply, and that enables a Q pulse width. I recommend, if you're just starting out with a fiber machine, leave this Q pulse the same number and just utilize the frequency, power, and speed. You'll be able to gain a lot of knowledge with that, and once you start becoming comfortable with that, you can start changing the Q pulse width, and you'll be able to have a better appreciation of how that setting will affect the engraving. Now, with these four different variables for creating engraving, I definitely recommend keeping a log journal book next to your computer and writing down your settings along with the results that you get. If you want to take it one step further as you're learning the effect of different settings of your machine, get a piece of large sheet metal like this, and when you're doing your test engravings, actually type out what your settings are. And then once you fill up this piece of sheet metal, you'll have a record of what settings looked like what. That's a really great way to build up a knowledge basis and experience with your new laser machine. The last thing I'd like to show you for the settings before I actually start doing some different engravings is I want to click on this button up here, and this is going to be different hatch patterns. And hatch patterns is going to be how the lines of the laser scan to fill in what would be our engraving. Right now I have hatch number 1. It is enabled, and the type, we can look at this picture and it's going to give us a diagram of how the scan lines are going to be from the laser head. And I can scroll through this by just clicking on it. And I like this one. This is the one that I usually use. It tells me the line space. I usually use 0.02. It's a really good default to use. And by the way, that 0.02 millimeter interval equates to about 1,000 lines per inch. Another really common thing to do is to change the scan angle. Right now, it's just going to go across flat like that. And for most cases, there's nothing wrong with that. But just generally, particularly when I'm doing text like I am in this example, I like to have that set at 45 degrees. When I click on the next hatch pattern, we'll see that I can't click on anything, and that is because it is not enabled. I can enable that. We're going to see I have the same type of hatch that I did on hatch number 1, and I can click in between there. Actually, I lied, and I'm going to click on this until they match. And this one, I'm going to put in the same line spacing of 0.02 millimeters. And for the scan angle, instead of 0 degrees, which again would be that way, I'm going to do the opposing 45-degree angle. In EzCad, this is how we create a hatch pattern. I'm ready to put some safety glasses on, and I can hit mark. And this one, I'll try this on a different layer. And to put this graphic on a different layer, I'm going to click on that color, and now it puts it on a different one. It's not by double clicking up here. It needs to have the object selected, and then you can click on the different layers down here. And once again, I'm going to deselect use default parameters. And this, I'm going to slow this down. I'm going to keep the power up. I'm going to turn the frequency down so it's going to have more of an impact going into that engraving. Once again, I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to check my hatch patterns, and this hatch pattern, this is going to draw rings and rings and rings all the way around, and I like the way that that looks. And because it's doing that, I no longer have the choice of picking a scan angle of what direction the laser is going to scan as it does the engraving. The line spacing still looks good. I like that, and I'll click OK. I'll frame this out by clicking the red button, and this will be the size. I like the way that looks. I'll hit stop, and now I can hit mark. And hopefully the camera can pick this up, but it's drawing out each individual shape, starting from the outside, working to the center. Thanks for joining me in this video. I had a fantastic time sharing with you how to install and set up the EzCad software with the GI30 laser machine by Monport. I hope that you'll join me in the next video where I'll be installing and setting up the Lightburn software. Until next time, learn, create, and share.